Welcome back to the In No Hurry podcast. This is your host, Colt Douglas Claiborne. Excited to be back with you again this week for another episode. And once again, I am bringing you a friend of mine that I have met and connected with on Substack. My guest this week is Phylicia Masonheimer. She is an incredible writer and thinker, and she's the founder of Every Woman a Theologian, which we will talk about in this conversation. But something that Phylicia and I connected with and have talked quite a bit about is our shared journey with infertility. She and her husband went through secondary infertility several years ago, and she wrote an essay about it that caught my eye earlier this spring. And I reached out and shared, obviously, what Emily and I have been going through, and we just were able to share kind of in that same struggle together. And it's never fun going through something like this, but when you can talk about it with other people and just know you're not alone, that's a really helpful thing. And so a lot of our conversation is about that topic, and I just have really appreciated her encouragement and just her vulnerability for how she walked through this and all the emotions that they dealt with. It's just not an easy thing. And I think the more that we talk about it and the more that we bring light to it, helps people who maybe haven't gone through that understand what it's like, and it can help all of us have more empathy for people that are going through that. So I'm really excited to share this conversation. Obviously, we talk more than just infertility. That is a big part of this conversation, but I'm so excited for you guys to hear from Phylicia. If you're not already familiar with her, I think you will love her. Definitely encourage you to check her out on Substack and all of her books. You can check out her ministry, which we will talk about in the conversation. So I'm so excited for this. Here is my conversation with Phylicia Masonheimer. Phylicia, welcome to the show. I am so excited to talk with you. We connected on Substack. I was telling somebody the other day, most of my guests lately on this show have been people that I've connected with on Substack, and it's been such a joy to meet other writers and other authors and read not only their work, but then get to talk to them as well on the show. So how are you doing? I'm excited to talk with you.
It's so good to be here, Cole. I have just loved everybody I've got to meet on Substack. It's been fantastic. I've just learned so much. I've gotten to read some of your articles, and we've got so many mutual friends now through there. So it's been really encouraging in my own writing journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get into some of your ministry work and your story. And obviously, you and I have talked a lot about our shared journey with infertility, which we can get into. But for people that are listening that maybe aren't as familiar with you, I'd love for you to give sort of just a brief rundown. Who is Phylicia? What are you interested in? What are your passions? And what do you spend a lot of your time doing?
Well, I am wife to Josh and mom to four kiddos here on earth and two in heaven. We live in northern Michigan and we have a small farm near Petoskey, which is kind of like a tourist town, but it's really beautiful. I grew up here, and Josh and I moved back here after we were married. So we've enjoyed building a life, kind of tucked away from most of the world, it feels like sometimes. And we together get to run the ministry, Every Woman a Theologian. I founded the ministry, gosh, I guess it's 10 years ago now. And Josh came on to join me in 2020. So we've been working together at the ministry for 6 years, and we get to publish all sorts of resources. We mainly specialize in verse by verse Bible studies and resources that really teach people how to understand what they believe and why they believe it across denominational lines. So it's the best work. It's so much fun. We have an amazing team. And then I homeschool our kids. So when I'm not working, I'm homeschooling our kids. I love to read classic literature. I'm always acquiring new book lists and specifically vintage editions. So I collect vintage editions of the
Okay.
classics anytime I can find them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of replace some of my like paperback versions with nicer versions as time goes on. So that's one of my hobbies.
Yeah, I don't collect them, but I love The Great Gatsby, and I love whenever I see really cool different covers of The Great Gatsby, and I'm tempted to buy them. But then I would just have a whole shelf of Great Gatsby books, and I'm like, I've already read this book 100 times. I used to teach it whenever I was an English teacher. I was a high school English teacher, so I taught it every year. And I mean, I know that's like the standard. Everybody reads that in high school, but I just loved it. And I love F. Scott Fitzgerald. And yeah, every time I go to a bookstore and I see a really cool cover, I'm so tempted to buy it, and I have to resist myself. So
I mean, I'm picturing a really cool display on the
yeah,
wall. I don't see anything wrong with that, but I'm an enabler when it comes to buying books.
you have like 1,000 books behind you. So yeah.
I do.
Yeah, you should see it down in our we have a room in our house. It's called the reading room, and my wife is a huge fiction reader. We have 4 IKEA bookshelves that are just full of all of her fiction books, and it's a beautiful room. So she is far and away the bigger reader of the two of us. But I have built-ins to my left and right, and then I have this bookshelf behind me that has all of my Christian living books. So I have a decent amount of books, but not quite to her collection and not quite to the one behind you as well. So
Well, I honestly, I love meeting other readers and getting recommendations.
yeah.
So one day I'll hopefully get to meet your wife and hear all of
Yeah.
her amazing recs.
She'll appreciate that I'm plugging this, but she is like really active on Instagram. She has a book account, Bookstagram account, I guess they call it, where she's always talking about what she reads and what she is going to read next, and she connects with other readers. She's got like 8,000 followers, and people love her recommendations. So yeah, I'll have to send you her page, and you can check out her
For
recommendations.
sure. Yes.
Well, I was reading a little bit about Every Woman a Theologian, and you shared a little bit, but your website says, yes, we believe every woman should be a theologian. Every woman should be a student of the heart of God. On this site and our social media, we teach you how to become that student and continue your biblical education one step at a time. Where did the idea for this ministry come from, and what's been some of the most rewarding aspects of this since you've launched it?
Well, I'm a millennial. I started
Shout out to
writing.
millennials.
Yeah, yeah, represent. Um, I started blogging very young. So at
Mhm.
16, when it was like
Yeah.
just kind of the
Like a
cusp of,
blogspot blog or like a WordPress
yes,
blog.
Blogspot.
Yep.
I was a WordPress girl, still am,
Same.
but
So,
I had a lot of
WordPress guy,
friends
but yeah.
on Blogspot.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how I started. And I started out writing just kind of basically exegeting passages of scripture that I thought were interesting and kind of writing about what this looked like in my own life. That was how I started. And then as time went on, began really engaging with the conversation around sexuality in the church,
Mhm.
specifically for women, because at the time, no one was talking about um, pornography addiction in women.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about kind of the underside of purity culture, which I
Yeah.
had kind of grown up adjacent to. And so I was one of the early bloggers addressing those topics. So in my late teens, early 20s, I wrote about sexuality, pornography, dating, marriage, purity, like all of those things,
Hmm.
partially out of my own testimony and partially because I had a small following of people that were asking these questions, and I would email them back and forth. I would engage with their questions. And this was before Instagram.
Oh yeah.
Well, at the time, Instagram was like pictures of your food, right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't really doing anything there. But eventually, it did lead to on social media, Facebook and Instagram, answering questions, creating content there, and just adapting as it changed. So by 2017, I compiled all of my writings on sexuality into a book, which at the time was called Christian Cosmo, so named for Cosmo magazine. Um, because women were going to Cosmo magazine at the time to learn about sexuality, like Christian
Yeah.
girls. That was the only place that was honest and would tell them like how to think about it. So Christian Cosmo kind of sought to offer a blunt, very honest approach to the questions that girls had after leaving purity culture, and kind of reframing according to what scripture says about sexuality. So that book was my first book, and it was self-published. It was an ebook, and eventually it became a print book. So that was the beginning for me in terms of writing. And then I began to write about other topics that were adjacent to that. So what was happening was people were asking like, okay, why does the Bible have the authority to tell me what to do sexually anyway? And so I
Hmm.
would study that and go, okay, well, here's why we can trust the Bible, and here's why it can give us this foundation. And then from there it went off into other topics that were, you know, related to the theological things that we were discussing. I got a degree in religion, and then just started teaching general theology, and eventually got a book deal to talk about that topic with Harvest House, and the rest is history. So
Yeah.
sort of step by step, open door after open door, expanded from a theology of sexuality to just theology in general.
Yeah. I would imagine when you started writing about all that, you had no idea that it would turn into a ministry like it is now. So,
No,
what has
yeah.
been, when you look back on it now, like what stood out to you as just how God has worked with your message
Mm.
and what you're trying to do with that? What's been some of the things that have really stood out to you?
I think, whenever I look back on it, I just think, gosh, I'm so unworthy to do this work. There's so much smarter people. I think being on Substack has just made that so apparent. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's just so many smart people in this world. Um, and I did not go to seminary yet. Eventually I will, but I have a bachelor's degree in religion, it's biblical studies degree. Um, and at times when I look back on it, I'm like, goodness, why was anybody reading what I was saying? Like, what did I have to say that was worth reading? But I can say that I've always endeavored to make clear the things of God, to make them accessible, to make them as honest. I mean, they're already honest, but to be honest about them, to show people the way of salvation and the way of freedom and the way of truth. And the Lord opened the doors to do that. And they were very little doors, right? They're little tiny steps that I just said yes to. And it's just
Mhm.
step after step after step. Just keep following him into the next thing. And he built this, not
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And it's his, and it will always be his. And I don't have any big, goals of it being this massive, legacy ministry or anything like that. I just keep following him step by step. And we get to see women's lives changed and see
Yeah.
them fall in love with the word of God. And that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, that's really cool. And these topics that you mentioned are often uncomfortable things for people to talk about and to write about. And I've even shared that with some of my friends. Like, I've struggled with some of those things, but it's not something that I have felt comfortable talking about publicly quite yet. And so when you were feeling convicted to share your own testimony, did you go through that where it was like maybe you were fearful of sharing that? And how did you get over
Oh, yeah.
that? And then on the other side of that, the feedback you've gotten from readers, I'd imagine they're grateful that you have been willing to share your own story.
It's so interesting, Cole, because it's almost like we're coming full circle a little bit on
Hmm.
this whole topic. Because I started out writing about an addiction to erotica, and not just an addiction, but my exposure to erotica, the normalization of erotica, which is pornography in written form.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your wife has probably addressed this on her Bookstagram account, or is at least aware of it, that it is very much a part of Christian women's fiction now.
Hmm.
It's almost inevitable. It's very hard to avoid the sexual content. And that was what I was unintentionally exposed to and then became addicted to. And there were women at that time kind of making it seemingly acceptable.
Hmm.
Um, and it was hard to share my testimony, mainly because I was terrified of what people would think who knew me
Yeah.
at that time. There was, this feeling of like, they could look back at our friendship or our relationship at that time and know that I was struggling with it then. And it just felt
Yeah.
very exposing. And it is exposing. Sharing your testimony will always expose you. But the beautiful thing about that is it brings something into the light. And once it's in the light, the enemy cannot use it to put shame on you. The
Yeah.
Lord takes it from there and he heals you. And I found the more I shared my story, the less of a hold it had on me.
Hmm.
And the more I brought it into the light, the less the darkness could make me revert back to that weakness.
Yeah.
And so sharing it is interesting because those posts are still live. They're old now, 15 years old, but they're there and they still have people reading them. People still email us about them. And we've actually come kind of full circle because erotica is now on the rise again. It's very normalized. It's talked about. It's immersed in regular young adult fiction, women's fiction. And so we're actually having the same conversations I had 15 years ago and 20 years ago all over again, but now through the ministry. So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting how God is still using that.
Yeah, that's interesting to know. Like, I had somebody comment on my podcast yesterday, and it was an episode that I did when this show first started in 2019. It was like the third episode. And it's like I had forgotten, that I'd done this show that long. So when you write something, you don't have any idea when somebody's going to find it because it's kind of like a time capsule. It's out there
Yeah.
on the internet, and you may not be struggling with that thing anymore, but somebody who is struggling it may find it,
Yeah.
and that version of you that wrote that, or that that you in that time period that wrote that, it's still serving in a great way to people. And I think that's one of the best things about writing, and whether
Yeah.
that's a book or an article, it's sort of a time capsule of like what that author was going through at that time. And like, which we'll get into, and maybe this is the segue. You wrote about your struggles with infertility, and that's something that my wife and I are walking through right now. And
Yeah.
that was something that I found your article like, I don't know, 2 years after you wrote it, or however long it was after you wrote it, and I found it at the right time because we're in the middle of that. And I think that's one of the best parts about writing and reading is just you don't know when something's going to find somebody or when it's going to affect them. So I guess it's a nice segue. First, thank you for writing that, because that was one of the more beautiful pieces that I've read about infertility. And just you again shared your own testimony, shared your story, and you're a mother, you're a woman, and I'm a man, so it's different from my perspective than yours, but I can still relate to the journey of walking through infertility and the hope and the waiting and the hope being deferred and all of that. And so, yeah, first, thank you for sharing. And then I'd love to hear just how how you walked through that with God. I know that's a loaded question, but anybody who's listening to this that has not gone through infertility, which I hope nobody ever has to, but it's a lot of hope and a lot of waiting, and then the way I've kind of expressed it, it's just like a roller coaster. I mean, it's a roller coaster. You get
Yeah.
up, you're really, really excited and hopeful, and then
Yeah.
you go back down, and then you start the hope back over each month, and it's just kind of
Mhm.
mentally and emotionally exhausting. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear your experience, how you walked through that, and why you also felt compelled to share your journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking about that. And I've been encouraged by your vulnerability in talking about this also in the short time that we've known each other through Substack, because I don't think there are enough men talking about this. I think that it's kind of treated as a woman's issue, which is so interesting because, right, it takes a husband and a wife to create a child. That's how
Yeah.
God designed it. And
Yeah.
even it wasn't until we struggled with infertility that I even realized that there can be male factor infertility, which maybe
Yeah.
sounds so silly, but we generally as a society, we assume if you can't have a baby, it's a problem with the mother, with the
Right.
woman. Um, and so there's not only this focus on her through the infertility journey in the physical regard, but also just in the emotional regard. It's almost like, oh, it must be so hard for you, and not much regard for what husbands go through in that process, because I don't know why. I don't know why. I think it's just like she's the one who's going to carry the baby. So, like, she must be impacted more, or even some of this leftover idea that, like, well, women are more emotional than men. So, the men, it must not bother them. And I just, I remember when we lost two babies to miscarriage and struggled with secondary infertility 3 years that we know about, but it was a total of 5 years
Mhm.
because the symptoms, once we recognized the symptoms, we realized they had been going on for two
Yeah.
additional years. And it was 5 years between our two kids. So like maybe four years
Okay.
officially. Um, and it's secondary infertility, whereas I know you and your wife are walking through primary infertility, which means that we had children and then
Hmm.
could not have them anymore for some reason.
Yeah.
So lost two babies 6 months apart in
Wow.
2024, and then found out that we were pregnant in January 2025. And I just remember when we got that positive pregnancy test, it was after 4 rounds of letrozole that we then stopped taking the medication. So we had been off of it for 2 months, I think, when we
Hmm.
got pregnant. So it's another like miracle in and of itself. The
Yeah.
letrozole did not work for us. And we just kind of had said, okay, I think we're done. But when we found out, I remember looking at the test, and we actually have a video of it because I set up my camera
Yeah.
so that we could kind of get Josh's reaction. And if you were to watch the video, we seem very apathetic. And and honestly, you laugh because you probably understand what I mean.
Yeah.
That there's this like, well, let's see what happens this time.
Yeah.
The kind of just you don't know how to be like accepting
You're so
and
used to a no
hopeful.
that you're almost expecting it. At least that's how I've been.
Yes. Yes. And we've spent months counting our lives in 2 week increments,
Hmm.
which is what you do. You wait, for ovulation, and then you test for pregnancy, and
Yeah.
then you do it all over again, and it's every single month,
Hmm.
and you get excited, and then you get the answer no, or it's yes and then it's no.
Hmm.
It's hard. And so my husband, to take this video, we're looking at the pregnancy test, positive pregnancy test, and we talk about it. We're like, okay, well, let's pray for the baby. So I turned off the camera, and my husband and I go to pray over the pregnancy. And my husband, just as he's praying, he just starts to sob. And it does make me a bit emotional. I've never seen him cry like that. And he just kept praying for the baby's life. Just kept praying for her life. No, that she's a girl. But at the time, I don't think I'd seen him cry like that since we were dating.
Hmm.
Um, and it just I was kind of shocked, and astonished. I just didn't realize how much it had been impacting him. And he was pleading with God, um, for this baby's life. And I think that what it just revealed to me was just how much that roller coaster
Hmm.
affects both parties in the marriage, and how heavy it is on men and on husbands, how they feel like they have to be strong for their wife, so they keep it together, and they hold themselves together. And I think just in that moment it really revealed, um just just how much infertility impacts both people
Yeah.
who are involved.
Yeah.
And so um it gave me a lot more compassion on him in that process as we move forward. And long story short, God in his grace did preserve our daughter's life. And it's a miracle. There's absolutely no there's no other word for it. And there's so many pieces of that I could tell you, but I won't get into that for time's sake. But God heard his prayer,
Hmm.
and she lived, and she's alive. She's 8 months old now. But
Awesome.
it has not, that's the happy ending, right? But there
Hmm.
were years of no happy endings.
Hmm.
And in that season, what I kept holding on to, and which is the title of the article you referenced, is that my faith is not for a baby. My faith is in Christ himself, so that whatever the answer may be, a baby or not a baby, I know that he still loves me, and he carries me, and he sustains me, and not just me, but also my husband, and also my other children who were walking the whole path with us as
Hmm.
well. And so that was where we had to camp out. Was our faith is not, oh God, I believe you and I trust you as long as you give me a baby.
Yeah.
It's, I believe and I trust you no matter what.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, the reason why your essay was so impactful to me is because that is the posture that we have. I mean, I say we've had to take. I mean, we have no other choice. Like, my dad came to visit us a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this at breakfast, and my wife said the same thing. She was like, obviously we pray for a child, but, and she has said this, and I think it's beautifully put, like, we're not guaranteed, we're not owed a child. Like, I think we kind of go into this like, oh, we get married, uh, God owes me a child or whatever. I forget how she's worded it, but essentially it's like we're not guaranteed to have a child, and we need to wrap our head around being okay with that. And I think as Christians, we are somewhat conditioned, or just in our mind we pray and we hope for the answer, and then we don't know what to do when that answer is no or not yet. And especially something like this that feels like such a big life identity thing, like, oh, I'm married, I want to be a parent, I want to be a father. What happens if God says no, or it takes way longer? And I've written about how, for me, there's a lot of pressure because I lost my mother when I was 14. My dad went through a battle with cancer last year, and so the reality was there's a world in which both of my parents could pass away before I have kids, and then my kids would never know my parents, or my dad would never see me be a parent. And that's been hard for me to deal with. And that's partly why I have felt so much pressure. And we've had to really take the approach that the beautiful part of, like, we've gone through all sorts of things the last 5 years. We had a tornado hit our house. We had to be displaced and move out and live with my in-laws for 9 months. During that season, my wife in her 20s got shingles. Like, there was all kinds of other issues that happened that I don't even have time to get into. I've lost my job. Like, there's just been all sorts of things that, like, we've gone through the ringer. And I'm like, the whole point of this, like, tells us in James, like, to consider it pure joy, because we are learning to be formed by God and go closer to God during this. And the reward is not a baby. The reward, like you said, is a deeper relationship with God. And it's in this world that we live in, it's hard for people that aren't believers to understand that. They're just like, oh, how do you deal with your friends getting pregnant and having second or third children? And I'm like, there was a time when that was really difficult, but those people are also praying fervently for us to have kids. So
Yeah.
like one of my best friends just shared with us that they're pregnant. They had a miscarriage, and their baby is due 2 years after their miscarriage. And
Wow.
it's just, I'm like, I'm so happy for them because I know they've been praying for it. They've been praying for us. And it's not a competition. It's not like, oh, you
Yeah.
get a child, so that means I don't get one. That's not how that
Right.
works. And so
Yeah.
I've really had to take this approach of like, it does not matter ultimately. I mean, it matters, but like, the goal is not the, like you said, the goal is not the child. The goal is for me to grow in my relationship with God, and I have to be okay with that. And frankly, there are days whenever I struggle with that. I struggle to really believe that and feel that because I'm just angry, like, God, why haven't you granted this prayer yet? And then I just have to really go to God, and I journal a lot. I wrote on Substack about how I started journaling to our future kid. I don't know if that kid is ever going to arrive to us, but that's been a way to help me process the grief that I've felt. So yeah, I think that was one big reason why that essay resonated, is because that has been the approach we've taken and really cling to, because we just feel like any other way we're not going to get through this.
Yeah. I think that's the heart of it is I think of this passage where I think I think it was Peter, maybe it was John, who are speaking to Jesus, and Jesus turns to them and he says, "Are you going to leave too?" And they say, "Where else would we go, Lord? The words of life belong to you."
Mhm.
And I think that's what I felt walking that road was people would say, why do you still follow God when everything that happened to us happened? Because it wasn't just the miscarriages like you. We had just thing after thing after thing in 2024 that was devastating to us. And someone might say, like, why do you keep following God when this is happening to you? And that's the verse that always comes to mind. Like, where else would I go? The words of life belong to him. He is the one who's the source of all hope, all strength. And I just look at scripture and see so many righteous couples who could not have children.
Hmm.
And if they're so righteous, if Zachariah and Elizabeth or Samson's parents, my kids and I were just reading the story of Samson. I didn't realize that his parents couldn't have children for a long time. And obviously, we know in the end they did, but we forget that there are years that they could not.
Hmm.
We know the ending of the story. They did not know. They were living righteously, and God was according to what the world would say, withholding from them. And
Hmm.
we can look at their example and see they still lived faithfully, they still lived righteously before or in spite of children. And I think that just gave me an example to look to of, okay, these people still believed God good. They still believed him trustworthy. They still believed him loving while walking through this very painful reality. And for me, in secondary infertility was hard because it was like we kind of took it for granted that we would just be able to have
Hmm.
more children,
Yeah.
which maybe you guys walked through this at the beginning of your journey where you get married and you think, well, when we're ready to have kids, well, it'll just happen. Right. And we
Yeah.
were just like,
Yeah.
oh, we just took it for granted. And then we couldn't, and we couldn't, and we couldn't. And we just thought, oh my goodness, I genuinely took this for granted. I genuinely thought I was in control and of the timing of everything. And we really learned a lot about that through that journey of just giving up control and saying, okay, Lord, whatever your answer, we believe you're good.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's been one of the hardest things is relinquishing that control. We purposely waited about 5.5 years before we started trying because we just wanted time to be married, just us two. And we honestly, I mean, we never thought you never go into a marriage thinking like, oh, we're going to deal with infertility. So we just didn't anticipate it. And so when it got to be about 6 months and we had been trying, and I was like, hey, should we get, checked to see everything's okay? And then my wife had a laparoscopic surgery about, I don't know, a year or so after maybe 6 months or so after we started trying, and they didn't find any endometriosis or anything. And at the time we were like, wow, like we kind of were hoping that we would find something to at least say like, here's
Mm-hmm.
why. And then it wasn't until we started seeing a fertility specialist that we got any sort of tangible answers. And that's been helpful. And now we have like some sort of a plan. But then it was really difficult. Like the first month we started on the fertility treatments, I allowed myself to get that hope up. It was like, oh, we're doing something different. Maybe this will be the month. And then when it wasn't, it was like, okay, well, then now the fear of like, well, what if this just never works? Starts coming
Mm-hmm.
back in my head. So there's just a whole range of emotions. And I guess the question that I want to ask you as it relates to that, I think for me, as I've gone through this, it's given me a lot of empathy for other people that have gone through it as well. And I feel like I'm better equipped to not necessarily offer advice or counsel, but at least be there for people that are dealing with this. Because I think when somebody hasn't, same thing if somebody hasn't lost a close relative or a friend, it's hard for them to know how to comfort somebody that's grieving. And so
Yeah.
when you were going through this, and maybe you can draw on that, but if people are listening and they have people in their lives who are dealing with infertility or have dealt with a miscarriage and they're not quite sure how to best care for those people or love on them,
Mm-hmm.
what worked well for you? Like what resonated with you when people were, I don't know, reaching out to you or caring for you. Put yourself, I guess, back, in those shoes. What did you want from people? What would you tell other people? Like I know whenever the tornado hit, it was like, hey, don't say, let us know if you need something. You should just
Right.
like, hey,
Yes.
if you feel compelled to help with somebody, like bring them, just go ahead and bring them food, or if
Yes.
whatever the case is, like go ahead and do it.
100%.
And so I'm curious, like in the context of like, hey, somebody who's dealing with infertility or a miscarriage, how can people best respond and care for those people?
Such a good question. And I'll be honest, over the years, I've struggled a lot with knowing how do I show up for people who've
Yeah.
gone through infertility or loss or losing a parent. Like I just don't know what to do. I've gone through difficult things, but I've been preserved from intense loss, like you losing your mother at such a young age. I didn't walk through that. So I struggled with knowing what to do. And I think I at times was that person who's like, let me know if you need anything, you know?
Yeah.
And so going through the miscarriage, there were so many wonderful things that people did for us. One thing that stands out was some friends of ours. I miscarried one of our babies while we were on vacation at a
Oh,
campground, and
wow.
it was so sad and awful. I was actually writing my most recent book. My edits had come back, and I was trying to do that while we were like at this campground, and I ended up losing the baby while we were there.
Wow.
And some friends of ours had flowers delivered to our campsite, which is actually not that easy to do. Like you have to like find find a place that can deliver and then have them go directly to the campsite and
Yeah.
find the site, right? But they did that. Like they actually had flowers delivered to the campsite the day after we lost the baby.
Mhm.
Um and so that to me just showed such tenderness, such awareness. And there were so many other people. People brought us meals. That's something I
Yeah.
think people forget. They bring meals after you have a baby,
Yeah.
but they often don't bring meals after you lose a baby.
Yeah.
And people did that for us. They sent cards, they sent little boxes of like gifts. They sent things for our kids. That was really thoughtful because our kids had lost someone too. They
Mhm.
sent things for Josh. You know, that things that I just, before I walked through it, I wouldn't have known what to do.
Mhm.
And it just gave me so much. I wrote it down. You know, this is what people did for me, and this is what I want to be able to do for other people
Yeah.
when they walk this road. But I would love to hear from you because that's losing a baby. So that's like an event, right? That people can kind of respond to. I'd be interested. I think for people with infertility, it's like it's not an event, it's an
Mhm.
ongoing reality. So they don't really know what to do
Yeah.
because it's like, well, how do I show up for something that's just kind of ongoing? What have people done for you that has been helpful?
I mean, I guess this was sort of an event. Like when that I published that essay, and I had no idea that National Infertility Week was even a thing. And it just happened to be that was the week that I published the essay. I'd been wanting to write that about, like, talking about how I had been journaling to our future kid. I just was putting it off, and then I published it, and I was like, oh, I did not even realize that this was a thing. So I put that out there. I shared it on Facebook, and then out of nowhere, we had a bouquet delivered to our house from the young adult pastor at our church. And I knew it was him because I could just tell. And it was during the NFL draft as well. And he knows I'm a big Chicago Bears fan. And he put on there, he just said, you know, you are not alone, from your Crossland Church family, and also go Bears. And I was like, that was just really thoughtful. And I
Oh,
texted him and I was like, I'm assuming this was you. And he was like, yep, we just, and they know what we've been going through. So that, I mean, that was, I guess, kind of an event because it was like I'd posted about it. But
mm,
honestly, I think the biggest thing has just been when people genuinely ask and care and just are present with us. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I don't necessarily need anything tangible. I mean, after the tornado hit, it was great to have people, they donated money, people were at our house cleaning up stuff, people would bring us food. That was all helpful. But also just like people being like, "Hey, I just want to come and like sit with you and like just be with you." And that was honestly that's since we don't, like you said, there's no event that is happening. It's just like an ongoing thing. I know that seems so simple, but it's just the presence of people that just like, hey, I am here with you. I'm in this battle with you. And we know that there are people so fervently praying for us. And we really do feel it. And I know like that seems like such a cop out answer, but it's just very simple. Like the presence of people, I think we don't realize how valuable that can be. Like just, hey, can I come sit with you at your house? Or hey, can we just get coffee and talk? Just very, very simple, and just like let somebody share what they're feeling. And I think the biggest thing too is we have a tendency as a society to always feel like we need to relate to people. Like, oh, you're going through this struggle. Let me share this struggle that I'm going through to make you not feel alone. And I get the temptation of doing that, but sometimes it's best to just let people share and then you just listen, you know? And
mm-hmm.
so I think in our situation, it's like I've enjoyed when people, I shouldn't say enjoy, that's a weird word, but like I've appreciated when people have allowed us to just
Yeah,
share and then they just
yeah.
are there to listen. So I know that
Yep.
seems very simple, but I think that's been the most meaningful thing for us.
No, I can see that because I had a friend who had walked through infertility come and just sit with me after the miscarriage, and that was such a blessing to me too, that she would come like in the evening and use her evening to just kind of sit and talk about it with me. And it made me think too of something that I think, and I don't know if you relate to this, but something that I also think it would be wise for people to keep in mind is if someone doesn't tell you about a miscarriage or about their infertility struggle until like it just suddenly just comes out of nowhere, and maybe they're really emotional or they kind of just drop it on you and it just doesn't feel like they've shared it with you before, it's really important not to get angry at them for how that information made it to you.
Hmm.
Because one of the harder parts of walking through the miscarriages was I had some people actually get mad at me for not sharing with them the way they wanted me to share with them, or not sharing with them at a certain time or on a certain time frame. And I was just trying to figure out how to even process it and
Right.
how to
Yeah.
process why it was happening. And so I think that sadly there are some people in our lives who they get upset at how the information is relayed instead of saying, "Oh, there's a reason why they didn't tell me for a month." Or they suddenly tell me out of the blue, but it's been going on for 6 months. Just have compassion on them. They're
Yeah.
they're trying to figure out when to share and how to share.
Yeah.
Um, don't get mad at them for how they share it. It's not personal. It's
Yeah.
it's just part of that process.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think my guess is people that haven't gone through this, they don't have the context for what it's like to process that. And so yeah, it's easy to look at it through a personal lens. And I hope that I am never that type of a friend that feels like that can be kind of a selfish thing of like thinking about how it was relayed to me, and when it's like, really, I want to be there for that person and know that like, yeah, I can, that's a really good point because I can see where that probably has caused issues in friendships and relationships. And yeah, whenever you're dealing with a miscarriage, it's a loss of a life, and you're trying to process how that works. I remember when my mom died, my dad told me that I needed to be compassionate with my friends because many of them probably did not know how to respond
Mm-hmm.
to the fact, because like, we were 14, and so they were like, many of these people had
Right.
never lost so much even as a grandparent at that point. So
Right.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah.
Um, well, I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you got to go tend to your children, so I want to let you go here soon. But I always like to ask this question at the end of the conversations. The name of the show is In No Hurry, and so I created this show whenever I was in a crazy busy season of life. I feel like that's the common theme for all of us. We always go through busy seasons. But what do you and your family do to just sort of slow down and relax and hang out? You're in northern Michigan, which I've heard is beautiful, especially in the summer. So yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
know. I know this is kind of a weird pivot from what we were just talking about, but I guess to end on a positive note, what do you guys do for fun to slow down when life gets busy, and how do you just sort of recenter yourself?
Honestly, Cole, I think it's actually really connected because in walking through the infertility journey, and again, our kids were a part of this. So
Yeah.
we told them we were pregnant and then we lost those babies. So they walked through the grieving process with us, which some families may not do, but it honestly was transformative, I think, for their understanding of God and suffering. And it really strengthened their faith in the long run. But I think the one of the reasons we could do that is because of our priority on a slow family culture. And our kids are school age, so we have a rising fourth and sixth grader, and
Okay.
we have a rising first grader. So right in that, elementary and middle school age. And a lot of Americans, with their kids, it's just go, go, go. Every night is booked, sports and commitments. And we
Yeah.
just don't do that. We really, really are careful to preserve our evenings, our days, rhythm with our kids. They're involved in stuff. But because of that, one of the ways that we we kind of live out this idea of not being in a hurry is we have theme nights on our calendar. And so each night has a theme that we follow to kind of prevent us from defaulting to media or overcommitting.
Yeah.
So Sundays are our Sabbath that we just rest. We do no media. Sometimes we host people, go to church, generally just kind of hang out together as a family. And then we have a Monday night is a personal night, so everybody can do whatever they want. Tuesday night is our small group. Wednesday night is our hobby night. So you can paint, you can do music, anything like that. Thursday is game night. Friday is family night or hosting. And then Saturday is either hosting or family night. So we kind of like rotate those. So we host twice a week, typically, both on Fridays and Tuesdays. And then we do movie night, whatever night we're not hosting. So it's been really great because it gives you like, okay, this is what we're doing. That's what's happening this night. It's blocked out and it kind of gives you a focus point, but then there's freedom within that focus or that theme. So
Yeah.
that really sustained us through that season of having the connection as a family, and not kind of filling the pain with more busyness.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. Well, where can people, I guess, best connect with you? Obviously, you're on Substack, and then you have a website, PhyliciaMasonheimer.com, which I'll include all of that in the show notes. But where can people buy your books, connect with you? What are the best ways to do all of that?
Yeah. I have 4 traditionally published books, and those are on Amazon. You can just look up my name and they'll come right up. I have a systematic theology for lay women called Every Woman a Theologian. I have a theology of home called Every Home a Foundation. And then I have a couple other books that are traditionally published. But then the majority of what I do is self-published. And that is on my website,
Okay.
PhyliciaMasonheimer.com. All of our verse by verse Bible studies. We have multi-sensory Bible studies that use art and music and modern worship and scripture to go through a book of the Bible. And then we have a whole kids resource line. So it's all theology adjacent, but it's where the majority of what I do can be found. So all of that is US made. We're made in the USA, shipped out of Michigan. AI free. We don't use AI for our writing and
We
our
love to hear
process of
that.
creating our
We love to
studies.
hear that.
So yeah, we would love for you to check out what we do. And that's just on my website, PhyliciaMasonheimer.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Phylicia, so much for joining the show. It was great to talk with you, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. And just thanks so much for sharing your story and the vulnerability, both in your writing and then also here, just about everything that you guys have gone through. And I hope people that are listening, whether they've gone through this or not, or they know people, I hope that they find this valuable and helpful and understand the different types of emotions and dynamics that go into infertility and miscarriage and everything in between. So thank you so much. This was awesome.
Well, thank you, Cole.
Thanks again to Phylicia for joining the show. I'm just so grateful when people are willing to come on to this show and share vulnerable life stories like she did. I don't take that for granted, and I hope that you, as the listener or watcher, if you're watching on YouTube or wherever else, don't take that for granted either. It's not easy to talk about things like infertility or miscarriage or just really anything in life that's difficult and heavy that deals with loss. And so I'm so grateful that she was willing to share her journey, and I really hope that you were able to find that valuable. And whether you've gone through that or not, I hope that this is helpful, because obviously if you have gone through it, there's somebody else that you know can resonate with your situation. But if not, I hope that this opens you up to having more empathy for people that have gone or are going through something like this, because it's just not easy. And I think we often don't know how to best react to this kind of news. And so I think hearing people's stories, knowing what it is that they were going through, can help us understand how we can be better friends and just love on people better during those times. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys will tune back in for the next episode. You can check out the show notes for all of Phylicia's contacts with her website, her books, her Substack. Also, if you want to connect with me, you can find that information in the show notes. Substack is going to be the best way to do that. But thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys find some time this week to relax and not be in a hurry, and we'll catch you next time.